Hello, dear students. Today we have a reading lesson, Unit 8. It's called Benjamin and the Paper Trial. Who is the author of the story? It's Marilyn Warner. And who's the illustrator of the story? It's Logan S. Klein. Let's read the sentence together. When Benjamin's grandmother is accused of stealing, he must use his wits to help her. In this part, we will only discuss 5 words. The words are Great Depression, squinted, suspects, rattled, and mortgage. The first word is rattled. Rattled means to make a series of short, sharp noises. For example, every time the wind blew, the windows rattled. They made short, sharp noises. Another example, his knock rattled our door. The synonym for rattled is shake. The second word is squinted. Squinted is a verb. Okay, look at the picture. Squinted, it looks like another word that we have discussed before. Squinted means to take a look with the eyes narrowed, to look closely and carefully. For example, the sun was so bright, so I squinted as I drove home. Another example, I squinted through darkness to see my way. You know, when you narrow your eyes and you look closely to see in the dark, okay? This means to squint. What's the synonym for squinted? Synonym is peered. Next word is mortgage. Mortgage. The T is silent, okay? So look at the picture. What's a mortgage? Can you guess? This is a man who went to the bank. Obviously, the bank gave him some money to buy a house and a car. Okay, so a mortgage is when a bank lends money to someone with a condition to pay them back, or the bank will take his properties. Okay, so the bank gives you money to buy something, but you have to give the money back to the bank. You have to pay them back, or the bank will take your things, your house, your car, and everything. For example, I took out a mortgage in order to buy the house. Though it took a long time, my parents paid off their mortgage this year, which means they gave the money back to the bank. The synonym for mortgage is debt. Debt, also the B is silent, just like mortgage. The T is silent. Next word is Great Depression. Great Depression. Look at the pictures. Do those people look rich and happy to you? No, they look poor. They look in bad condition. So a Great Depression is a period of decreased economic activity. Decreased means low, not very high, just low. Okay, so when people don't have money and the banks are not trusted, this is called the Great Depression. It was a time when people were poor and they didn't have money. During the 1930s, the US suffered a Great Depression. During the Great Depression, people had to carefully save money. The antonym for Great Depression is development. Next word is suspects. Suspects here is verb, okay? Suspects. Suspects means to form an opinion from little or no evidence. So when you think that someone has done something wrong, but you don't have enough evidence, you can't prove that they did this thing. For example, the sheriff suspects her to take the money, so he thinks that she took the money, but he doesn't have enough evidence. He suspects this man's behaviors. The synonym for suspect is doubt. Now let's start reading page 120 in your reading book. Benjamin licked his lips as dinner roasted in the oven. Who's Benjamin? Benjamin is the little boy you can see in the picture here. You see him? This little boy is called Benjamin. Tonight, he and Oma were having chicken and string beans with apple streusel for dessert. A feast. He wished Oma would hurry home. As he stirred the beans, a knock rattled the front door. Rattled. What's rattled? Shook, okay? To rattle means to shake or to make short, sharp noises. So a knock shook the door. I need to talk to you, Mrs. Levine, a voice called out. So the man at the door was saying, I need to talk to you, Mrs. Levine. Mrs. Levine is Oma, okay? These are the same person. Ben opened the door, and there stood Sheriff Leon. So who's the man in the picture? This is Sheriff Leon. Where's your grandmother? His grandmother, Benjamin's grandmother, is called Oma or Mrs. Levine. Okay, so where is your grandmother? The sheriff asked, peering inside. She walked across town to the Grady house, sir. Hmm, that's strange. I talked to Mrs. Grady less than an hour ago. Sheriff Leon squinted at the candles on the table. Squinted. He looked closely with narrowed eyes. Looks like you're having a fancy meal, like it's a special occasion. He took off his hat. You're just a boy, Ben. But if I ask you something straight out, will you give me an honest answer? Ben said, Yes, sir. The sheriff cleared his throat. Did your grandmother pay off the mortgage today? What's a mortgage? Money that she had taken from the bank, and today she paid it off. She gave it back to the bank. Yes, Ben answered proudly. The depression had made times tough, but he and Oma worked hard. They had reason to hold their heads high. The depression is the Great Depression, remember? The period of time in which people were poor, they didn't have enough money, and the economic activity was low, decreased. Well, here's the situation. Mrs. Grady's fur coat is missing. Your grandmother does laundry and cleaning at the Grady house, and today she paid off her mortgage. What does this mean? What do you think this means? He twisted the brim of his hat. Mrs. Grady suspects your grandmother took the coat and sold it. Suspects means she thinks that Oma stole her coat, but she doesn't have enough evidence for it. Who are the characters in this part? We have the little boy, he's called Benjamin. We have his grandmother, what was she called? Oma or Mrs. Levine. And the man at the door, what was his name? Sheriff Leon. And at last, Mrs. Grady, the woman who suspects that Oma stole her coat. What's the setting of this story? The place and time. The place of the story, remember at the beginning of the story, Benjamin was preparing dinner and he was waiting for his grandmother, Oma. So the place is Oma's home, or Benjamin and Oma's home. And what's the time? The time is during the Great Depression. What's the clue for this part? The clue is that Sheriff Leon tells Benjamin that Mrs. Grady suspects Oma stole her coat and sold it to pay off her mortgage.